Right, let's resume. Before we go into the next item, which is the procurement of modern diesel ferries, we've had a request from Councillor Williamson and Councillor Stewart that they need to leave and they would like to attend online. I will move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you very much. It's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll put it. All those in favour, say aye. To the contrary, say no. That. So let us then invite Dean Kimpton and the Auckland Transport staff to the table. Councillors will have read this report. Mr. Kimpton, can you speak to it briefly, please? We have a question from the Mayor on procedure. Oh, just. Thank you. Mr. Kimpton.
Kia ora everybody again, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to this paper. Can I acknowledge, I know this is a matter of concern, both Auckland Transport, but Auckland Council and Auckland Council laws. Can I acknowledge that I wish, with hindsight, we had brought this paper to you 3 or 4 months ago. If we had, I don't think we'd be having the discussion with some of the concern that sits underneath or below the waterline that we have today. So in that respect, you have my apologies on behalf of the organisation. In parallel is Auckland Transport, from the board through to staff, we have looked to act in good faith at all times in the way that we ensure continued delivery of the ferry services. The challenge that we are looking to balance and deal with is we have an ageing ferry fleet. 10 ferries need to be replaced over the next 3 to 5 years. We have got new technology coming in the form of electric ferries, two electric, 2 hybrids. And we need to prove that we're satisfied that technology will work in an open harbour environment that we have here in Auckland, okay? You can go and talk to the Port of Auckland about their Sparky, their tugboat. It's been in service for 12 to 18 months and they're still learning about the technology on that and how it works. Their lessons are our lessons. We will learn on ours. So we don't want to race off and build a complete electric ferry fleet until we know and have learnt from the ones that we have in place. But we've got an immediate need. If we don't replace some of the aged ferry fleet, we will have to stop services in some locations, and we don't want to do that either. So in good faith, the board and the executive, along with the team, had made a decision that short term we needed 3 modern diesel ferries to hold the gap. They're designed in a way that we can then sell offshore again. They're designed to Australian standards. We don't have our own specific ones. That means that they are saleable. We remain committed. So this is a short-term issue to deal with service provision. We remain committed to the decarbonisation and electrification of our ferry fleet, but that decision is also subject to funding. If we don't get funding in the future, we may well end up coming back asking for more modern diesel fleet. That's not our choice, but that is a decision that you as funders, along with government, will make. But it's not a decision we're asking for today, but I'm just signalling this may not be the end of the story. There will be a funding decision story down the track. So that's the context that we're sitting here with this paper, and that's why we want to bring it before you. I'm going to hand over to Stacey because she can talk a bit more about some of the elements. And we've got Nathan here, who's the program director for the fleet replacement of the ferry fleet electrification project. So maybe Stacey and a few comments, and then happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Chair. I'll be brief because I know you've all read the paper in terms of that. One thing I did want to touch on was about the funding, because there were queries last time about funding from the Climate Action Transport Targeted Rate being used to procure the diesel fleet. So we wanted to just ensure that that was made really clear that we were not using that funding to be able to build these new 3 diesel fleets. It'll be funded from existing council general rates and debt allocations within the current capital budget without using that. Future budgets will be addressed in the next long-term plan and how we going forth, like Dean said, and I think you would want to see some really good data in terms of how that new electric and hybrid fleet prove themselves on the harbour before we come back with any sort of further decisions around that too. But it does get us through that key piece in time where without doing this we would be in a position where we did have to significantly cut ferry services. Now we do have Nick here from the Auckland Council Qatar team if you have queries around the Qatar funds and how that's being used in terms of this program. But I will leave it at that, Chair, and sort of go to questions, I think.
Let's go straight to questions now then. Questions, members? Councillor Simpson, Deputy Mayor.
Okay, so basically we're between a rock and a hard place, right? If we want ferries to continue, we have to stick with diesel. That's not the ideal for us, it's not the ideal for council, but if we don't, there's no ferries. You don't have enough ferries. Is that correct?
In short, yes.
Once we, is there a chance that we can on-sell those ferries at another time to somebody else? Not that I think that anybody.
They've been designed such that they can, and we believe there will continue to be a market for that size ferry. And yes, so the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you. The bit that's missing in the report for me is a picture, because every other thing, when you talk about boats, you see what they look like. And you can't describe a boat in words if you can't see what it is it's going to look like. So can we, and presumably it says here you're going to actually purchase them, so you must have an idea what they are, and so that would be nice. So what's the cost differential between a diesel and electric ferry? Because Fuller's had an argument, had a bit in the paper saying that they'd only ever buy a Fuller's one, so that's one question. And the second bit is that if there's a funding problem, did you consider letting the operators buy their own ferries?
I will, thanks, Mayor Brown. I will start this. I may dip into having Nathan to support some of that commentary in it. The electric fleet are circa 20 mil a vessel, where the diesel fleet is circa 8 mil, and for the same capacity in terms of that. So, of course, you've got to look at the operating costs over the lifetime of the vessel, where they pretty much match even based on the trajectory. Actually, I think the electric comes under, but what happens with the electricity prices is over that term, as well as diesel prices, is, of course, they're flexing that sort of model, yeah.
Well, that's fair enough. I understand. But what about who owns them?
The reason we wanted to own at least a portion of the fleet, because we have other operators out of the network, so some routes will be operated with their own vessels and they're specified as such. But having a contingent in terms of where AT owns the vessels allows us what I call better procurement decisions, because of course if you don't have available fleet with procurement timeframes, incredibly difficult for new entrants to come into the market. Yeah. So it is about that long-term strategy for Auckland to make sure that we have reliable ferry services that are also in terms of working towards making sure that there was market equity there.
Okay, that's fair enough, but I still want to see a picture. That's how you give us a map when you go on a flat thing, so we can see what's going on. I want to see what the boat looks like. That's what boating magazines are full of pictures.
Pictures coming.
I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a list going here. I'll come back to you. Was that a supplementary on that question? So the next question I have is Councillor Walker.
Sure. So thank you, Madam Chair. I've been asking some questions around the ferries for coming up a couple of years now. This report still doesn't address the question I've been asking, which is around the cost of these electric Hamilton Jet ferries. The report doesn't give any itemised cost, and I understand that the build is still ongoing, and I don't doubt that there are overruns. I'd also like a cost for the hybrid ferries. That's the diesel hybrid ferries that are being built. The other concern that I have, Madam Chair, given that I've been raising this issue for some time and engaging with companies in New Zealand that have been interested in building ferries, that is, building ferries capable of running on these routes, why hasn't that been considered, or have we simply dropped the ball and left it too late? So I've got a couple of questions. One, around the costs that I've been asking for some time.
Let's
Second,
take one at a time.
Second, why can't we buy the ferries locally, or have we simply dropped the ball and it's too late? Two questions.
Okay, in answer to the two questions, Councillor Walker, on the 21st of August, we responded in some detail to your question on costs. They went to your elected member assistant, Miro. So you'll find all the answers there, and I'm happy to circulate them to all the other councillors. And the second one, the construction and the technology for the electric ferries we've got are local.
They're built locally.
They're built locally. We've been to the yard. It's using local Kiwi technology. I think it's an outstanding story of...
That's the Hamilton Jet stuff you're referring to.
Well, physically to build as well. It's the McMullen and Wing, just in East Tamaki. It's happening. It's local. It's us doing our stuff in Auckland for these ferries. Yep.
But equally, we could have built these ferries that you require. We could have built fit-for-purpose ferries. They could have been capable of conversion to electric. We've had offers for that. I've certainly had approaches from companies around that.
So it's your question about conversion of existing diesel fleet to electric. We've looked at a whole range of options, haven't we? And none of them are cost effective compared to the route that we're going. Stacey.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Walker may be meaning is, have we sort of looked at what other fleet availability there is? And the short answer on that is yes, we have. The longer answer is standardisation of fleet for infrastructure and interoperability is key to being successful and making sure we have good asset utilisation. But we have had really good conversations, and I know the team have had really good conversations with others that have expressed interest to try and help them to understand what the model is going forth and where they may be able to participate. So to make sure that we're not closing off to other ideas.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
A couple of follow-up questions on this item. First of all, just in respect of the electric ferries, Wellington, of course, has the Ikariri, which has been in operation since March 2022. It's been out for 9 months with some issue to do with parts, but it's been functioning on the harbour for the best part of 3 years now. Seems to be very successful, certainly a lovely ferry to travel in. I'm curious if we've had any interaction with, I think it's East by West, isn't it, down there? Obviously, their experience is based on real-time travel, and I think they have learnt a lot over the period of those couple of years. So have we had any interactions with them in terms of, you know, sort of better informing ourselves?
Thank you, Councillor. We have, so there's Webco, who's a ferry manufacturer, Mackay, who's an electrical integrator based in Northland, and then East by West, who's a ferry operator. We have engaged with all of those parties and did a visit on the Ikariri to really understand what makes that vessel tick, what lessons that we can learn. This was some time ago, probably 18 to 24 months ago, and what we should do to kind of make sure our ferries in Auckland are resilient and work well. I'd say there are some analogies with our ferries in Auckland. So their ferry is carbon fibre, similar to the EV Maritime ferries being constructed in Auckland, and the battery provider is the same as well. So the same form factor and how they're using their batteries is similar to what we're doing in Auckland. Thank you.
As far as the diesel ferries go, and I understand the situation we're in, and certainly these new diesels are a world removed from the old 25, 30-year-old diesels. I mean, these are very technologically advanced and very fuel efficient. Just in terms of our options there, now, and I think Councillor Walker alluded to the possibility in some instances where they have the capability to be designed for future electrical power conversion. So there are people who can do that. Some of these, and I'm thinking in terms of the different travel patterns of a number of these routes now, where we have not so much big, 200-300 people travelling at the peak hours, but people travelling in smaller numbers throughout the days. And Stacey showed how that patronage has been, really improving, which is really good. So in terms of the availability of these sort of smaller craft, maybe 125, 150 passengers who operate at a faster speed, therefore cutting down some of these journey times by as much as 10%, which is pretty impressive. Superior fuel efficiency, better performance in rough water, which affects some of our routes, lowering the manning requirement, and their production time, I think in one instance, was only 15 months. I'm just wondering, did we take a view where, given that change in travel behaviour, whether those sorts of craft, might be more future-proof than perhaps, the conventional kind of seatage and everything that went along with it?
I can talk briefly to that. We have smaller routes in the network, and you're absolutely right, Councillor, something in the range of 120, 150 passengers is perfect for those routes. We also have high volume routes where 200 passengers, maybe slightly more, is appropriate in the morning peak to avoid leaving our passengers behind. These ferries are designed for 200 passengers, primarily to replace some diesel ferries AT has at the moment, which are reaching end of life, and designed for those kind of higher capacity routes. But you're right, it's very much matching the ferry to the route.
Yes. Okay. So final question, and as I said, I noticed in some of those companies have come, their actual travel time is appreciably faster. So it's a really upgraded service here, and I guess that's my final question, goes to, we know our fleet is really aged and pushing 3 decades in many instances. What impact do you think the newer diesels, and then obviously the electrics and the hybrids once they get going, is going to have on terms of ferry travel as an option for people? We service basically 9 major routes around Auckland. This is surely going to uplift the experience and the performance for those people that are using the ferry, isn't it?
I hope so.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. The next question is Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. It'll be no secret that I'm pretty disappointed in this direction. Is this largely because of the $75 million cut by the government and the deprioritisation of the fleet?
There's probably 3 of us that can answer aspects of that question. I wouldn't want to put it all on just the deprioritisation of funding. Clearly that is one of the issues. I think we would have gone out with more electric ferries earlier, but we still need to prove the technology and its performance on our open harbours. And so it is both and answer to that one, and that's the honest perspective. We might have, instead of 2, we might have done 4. But we would still need to prove the technology, be satisfied that it works, so we could learn for the next generation.
Okay. Well, was 70% of ferry orders internationally assumed to be EV, and Sydney Harbour, New South Wales have said they're going to be fully electric by 2035. Do you not think that this makes Auckland kind of backward? We're not. Sorry.
I think the short answer is no. I don't think we're backwards. I think we're leading the way here in terms of it. And does it seem counterproductive to go this way? I can understand that too, but we got to look at the resilience of the network as a whole. So huge high confidence in shorter routes for ferries with electric. We need to get that confidence and use the data to have the confidence in the longer routes and conditions. And will we get there? Yes, I think we will. But it is a journey. We need that resilience in the fleet. Otherwise, we will be in a situation where we're chopping ferry services, and we don't want to do that again.
Okay, how many additional EVs or low emission ferries will we get? Just none.
I think that's entirely dependent on what the funding situation is. And so we need to have that reset, and I think we've committed to doing that reset with Auckland Council and work on this together about what that
Can I
reset
ask you
looks
to
like.
speak into the microphone a little more?
Yes, sorry, Chair. And so we do need to do that reset and sort of look at what that future LTP looks like, and there's a commitment. We will absolutely do that to make sure we're on the same page and can understand that funding and how far we can stretch it with the fleet replacement schedule we have. Absolutely.
Okay, but if I'm trying to work out the funding, because much like the buses, right, we use the fee up front to help the companies buy electric buses, and then we save significant funding on the operations. I mean, Fullers are saying that it's 60 to 70% cheaper operating because of the diesel and the lack of need for servicing, and they're sort of saying they can't understand why we would go down this track. Are we looking at the broader costs, so the whole of life as opposed to just that? And if we have money for the diesel ferries, and now could we not combine that funding with the CAT-out, or as the government said, they will just no longer subsidise any low emissions ferries? Because it sort of seems like we've had to make this decision because we won't get this subsidy anymore.
I think there's an accumulation in terms of decisions we've had to make. But the thing is, if we're in a situation going forth where we have confidence in the technology and the funding to proceed in terms of that, we absolutely will be. Back to Mayor Brown's question about can the fleet be on pass? Can we sell the fleet? Are they sellable to other markets? Yes, they are. And that's a commitment. We want to get there. We've got to make sure we can get there and run ferry services reliably for Auckland while we do that. That's our commitment.
But if most people are buying EV ferries, most cities, will there be markets for someone to buy our older, new diesel ferries?
The information that we have suggests there absolutely is. And I don't think that electric ferries are as widespread as what we necessarily think. It's an emerging market, and definitely people are going to be transitioning to that. But again, I think we're sort of leading the way a lot with that, with how we're doing it.
Okay, I mean, I know they're not the same thing, but I remember these same sort of conversations with the buses, right? And you backed, you personally backed as well as professionally backed the stopping to buy diesel buses. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people were sceptical, and next year we're going to have almost 40% of the fleet fully electric. Can we not lean in and do that too? Because I don't think people thought we could do that within 4 years, and we have.
No, absolutely agree, Councillor. And actually that's a really good example, because when we started with electric buses, we procured them ourselves and tested them and got the operators' confidence and if they could do a full days in service, kilometres. And so we had to do a couple of years of trials before we actually got to a position where we put to the board about procurement of electric fleet only going forth. So it is actually the same approach, right? It's just in terms of slightly different pathway, but same approach in terms of investing the technology, trialling it, getting the data, getting the confidence of our stakeholders before pursuing forth.
And last question, Madam Chair, just on the cost, have we factored in, because obviously the current government's direction on the ETS and the climate the emissions plan for New Zealand, like they're leaning far heavier into the ETS and pricing rather than carbon reduction. Have we factored in that 20% of our emissions are these ferries? What does that look like to the cost on top of likely diesel costs going up over time? Have you factored the cost of that?
Yes, well, I was going to say yes, we have. We know there is likely to be an increasing disincentive to purchase diesel over time as the cost of diesel kind of increases. I guess it just comes down to, as I kind of mentioned, I think having the funding available to do electric now, additionally the charging infrastructure, and then I think there's a big time element. Councillor Watson talked to maybe 15 months for a diesel ferry. It's broadly 3 years for an electric one, so we're, as the Deputy Mayor said, a bit squeezed at the moment between having ferries that are urgently needed to be replaced, services that need to continue, and our ability to fund and install charging infrastructure and procure electric ferries. So we're in this really kind of difficult spot at the moment, which we're trying to kind of get ourselves out of.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks for your allowing me to have another question. Sorry, I meant to ask. Knowing that we don't have any really choice, if we don't have a ferry, there's no passengers, could you just confirm how many passengers would be disrupted or prevented from using a non-road-based public transport option if we didn't buy these ferries?
Thousands. I will get back to you with the numbers. If you give me a minute, I can actually tell you.
I think that's important, because if the ferries are not allowed to operate, these people will have to go to a road-based system. So I'd be really keen to know what that figure is. I think, respectfully, it just helps.
Have a road.
Yes, I know. But by getting them on a ferry, it means that you get less people on the road. So I think it helps your story, not that it's a good one, but.
Why don't we give you a moment to work on that? And while you do that, I have Councillor Walker and then Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've noted the information that was sent to me. I hadn't picked it up. It was in a Lagoima. The further question I've got is around whether these ferries that we're commissioning, the electric ferries and the electric hybrid vessels, are actually fit for purpose compared to better ferries that we could otherwise get. I've got a few questions. The electric ferries, that's the McMullen and Wing, they've got Hamilton jet technology. Is that the case?
That's correct.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but because they have Hamilton jets, that means they can't foil. In addition to that, the electric hybrid vessels have got the Hamilton jets, then they've got a set of diesel engines as well. They're much heavier in the water. They're going to be less efficient to run. Are you conducting any sort of investigation into what is actually fit for purpose going forward? And in particular, bearing in mind that none of these ferries are going to be suitable for the outer runs.
Councillor, I'll try to respond to those questions. I don't pick up all of them. Please come back to me. So both types of ferries have jets as opposed to propellers. This is appropriate due to a number of the kind of more tidal locations around work, like Half Moon Bay, where the ferries will be operating. It's very difficult to get props into Half Moon Bay when you've got a king tide multiple times a year. So jet boats basically builds in that resilience. The ferries are not designed to be foiling boats, so we have a company here in Auckland, Vessev, who's got a very innovative small foiling boat running around the harbour. The ferries are not intended to fly in the air and foil on the harbour. There was a question around the hybrids. You're right, they do have a diesel backup generators. So the two hybrid ferries are intended to run the Devonport route, so our highest volume route on the Auckland public transport network, 300 passenger ferries, primarily running on electric to Devonport. If there is an issue, so maybe an electrical outage or there's a delay in the timetable, they've got the diesel generator there to provide some resilience and backup because of the importance of that route. I would probably note there's a lot of testing and trialling to be done over the next couple of years, which Dean alluded to really prove out the technology and understand before we procure more ferries, and I'm sure refinements to be done.
So just to clarify then, the diesel element on those ferries you mentioned is simply a generator, not another set of engines run by diesel.
Yes, that's correct. It's a generator that feeds onto the electrical bus and that supplies the electrical system in the ferries. So the batteries and diesel effectively power the same motors. Okay,
thank you.
Chair Baker, and we hope you're feeling better.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks for stepping in this morning. Look, just question that hasn't been mentioned much here is the charging infrastructure that's required and the cost of that, but also just the challenges of that and the electrical supplies. Have you got any information on that, and how has that played any part in the decision making?
It has, Councillor. We talk regularly to others around the globe who are doing similar things, and we're very blessed in Auckland actually to have a good power supply, and we can get good connections from our Vector network. But some of the locations we've chosen initially, such as Half Moon Bay, that's based upon the ease of getting power. Not all of our locations, I guess, are blessed by a robust power supply. Many of our ferry locations, like if I pick on kind of Devonport where I live, or near where I live, it's really hard to get a big power cable out to Devonport, and it's much easier at Half Moon Bay. And so we have made some decisions based upon the cost and the efficiency of electrification at this stage, and we're likely to learn those lessons from the charging and then basically, improve future stages.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Because we have an issue with our bus charging as well, where we can only take charging for the buses when there's capacity because we have to take so much. When there's only spare capacity, the Vector have. I remember, is that would be the case here too? Because they just take so much juice, wouldn't they?
They are being designed to tie into the Vector network, and at peak times they can take slightly less charge, and then at off-peak times they're unlimited. So we're definitely working with Vector on that.
So I
Okay, thank you.
have further questions at this stage, but, I'm sorry, Stacey.
Thanks, Chair. Just updating in terms of those numbers. So if we limited impact, and obviously limited any impact to Devonport, which is the huge volume that travels on that service, you're still looking at about 8,500 journeys a day. Yeah, across those other services that could potentially be impacted and have to revert to other modes. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to remain just while we put up the recommendations. I've got the changes that I'll get Barry to speak to just briefly under C. And if there's any comment, you might care to make it before you withdraw. So Barry, do you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Chair. And this is just noting some of the conversation that I'm sure may come out in debate, and some of the questions, of course, around which Dean has also acknowledged engagement with the council around the decision making, and it's just clarifying those. And with the 3 points there, decision was made by Auckland Transport without oversight by Auckland Council, and Dean has noted that Auckland Council's adopted strategies and direction to Auckland Transport, including the direction to carbonise the fleet, and that's something that's been talked about before, of course, and as part of Council's direction. And but the key bit there is just request Auckland Transport to engage with Auckland Council on matters of importance prior to decision making, which is probably addressing the thing that I think Dean raised in his opening statements about this.
Is there anything to this, Dean, you want to add? If not, I'll ask you to withdraw, and to thank you very much for appearing before the committee, and again acknowledging that your chair of the board is here, and we really welcome his presence here today, so thank you.
So we have no comment.
Thank you. I will move the recommendations, and Councillor Dalton will second the recommendations. It is now open for debate, and the first I have is Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is an important decision. Auckland, City of Sails, after all, but our ferry fleet for quite some years now has been lagging behind that proud slogan that gets trotted out every so often. In respect of some of the comments that are made about, the choices or lack of choices here, there is only one known operational fully electric ferry in the Southern Hemisphere. There's one, and that's the one in Wellington. The Ikariri, constructed by Webco, been going for about 3 years, really successful, really cutting edge, and a company and operator who have learnt a lot as they've gone along. So the technology with the electrics is an evolving one, and that they would, I think, be the first to concede that they know a lot more now than when they started, but there's still a long way to go. So in some ways, there is something to be gained by just waiting to see how things pan out over the next few years. The fleet, after all, that we're looking to replace is 29 new ferries. We're coming for 3 today. They need 10 over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think that this is a fairly safe sort of option, and certainly one that's needed on some of the routes. Some of the older ferries, you know, they're slower, they're noisier, and they're less resilient when the weather's not so good. So, you know, there is no choice there. And whereas big investments been made in rail and in the bus network, that hasn't happened with the ferry network. So this is a kind of opportunity to catch up a little bit with nothing like the capital investment that has accompanied rail and bus. My only kind of reservation is to do with the options to us in terms of the type of craft, and there's some exciting options with some of the builders that are around now with the diesel ferries. As we mentioned earlier, there are some of them that can provide for future conversion to electric. When you look at some of the stats for some of these ones, they're faster. They're far better able to cope with some of the rougher routes, which is a problem for some of them. They have lower manning requirements for the lower passenger numbers, so that's reducing the costs, and the commute time in a number of those runs goes down by about 10%. So I can only hope that the build that we've opted for is as good as some of these ones that have been promoted by some of these New Zealand kind of cutting edge companies that are around, because everything they appear to be offering is a significant progression of what we've got at the moment in terms of design, performance, travel time, commuter experience, you know, that would really transform a number of those routes for the better. But I guess overall, Madam Chair, it is good to see this investment coming through. We've got quite a way to go with our ferry fleet. In a number of instances, the ferries are servicing areas that are experiencing huge growth, like Hobsonville Point and other places. The amount of traffic that they take off the roll are quite critical in the overall network. So, you know, it might not be the numbers of buses, but it's sufficient enough to help local networks where people are choosing. And of course, you've got to remember at the end of it, the use of the water doesn't cost us anything much. You have a terminal at either end, and there's no congestion, there's accurate travel times, and there's a whole different experience. So people travelling by the ferries, it's a bit like travelling first class as compared to economy class, because it's enjoyable. And if you look at people getting off the ferries, they're so much more relaxed. So I think it's the way of the future. This is a small start, but it's an important one. So I'm very happy to support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Fletcher, for C, and for everybody that helped massage that into the outcome that we have here. I'd like to acknowledge Dean and the team, and noting the report at point 8, they've acknowledged that the decision to progress the purchase of diesel vessels, given its significance and potential misalignment with previous strategic intent, should have been presented to councillors in a more formal way. And it sort of goes a little bit to what I discussed earlier in an earlier item, and that is the regional agreed strategies, networks, priorities, and then what happens along the way, that we all keep oversight of that. The example I gave was a local board having a veto over a regional network, and we're going to end up with misalignment, and we're going to end up with an inequity across the region if you're going to be going from one place and then there's a gap because the local board decided they didn't like it. In this instance here, it is just going back to the fundamental of, we have a strategic intent, we have a strategy, and the horrible word TERP does still exist. So it says in this report, previous strategic intent. That maintains the strategic intent of this council. It might have changed for Auckland Transport during the course of the budget and the changing of the GPS, but councillors need to be aware, because councillors at this point in time are going out campaigning for election, and they want to do that with the confidence of knowing what existing strategies are and what they can deliver to their communities, whether their communities prefer roads to cycles or public transport to cars. Everybody needs to understand what role they can play in delivering the outcomes that their voters are going to give to them. So for me, it is around that communication and ensuring that we're sticking to what we believe that we have agreed to as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Lee.
Yes, it's quite an interesting development. I think this intervention by AT in the ferry market happened about this time 3 years ago, and a lot of initiatives happen during the election hiatus, and it's not necessarily for a good outcome. But anyway, in Auckland, and I'm a ferry user, and sometimes the ferry is a little bit late, and I get marked down by the New Zealand Herald for coming in a bit late with the timekeeper over in the corner there. Anyway, leaving that aside, the ferry system in Auckland has always been privately owned and operated, and that's worked out okay, especially personified by the late George Hudson, who was the founder or the builder of Fuller's, and quite a visionary person. On the other hand, we've never had, like we've had, for instance, with the ARA bus service, which was the biggest bus operator in the company for about 3 decades, a completely publicly owned, vertically integrated ferry service. Now we have a kind of a hybrid. We are somehow the new owner of Fuller's. Sir Brian Suter has talked ARC managers into buying his ferry vessels for him to operate. And there are some concerns about that. In some ways, it could be the public are made to socialise the cost, and the overseas shareholder privatises the earnings. So there is some concern about that, but given that the decision to enable this has already been made, I am really concerned now that we have a competing operator on the Waiheke run, for instance, Island Direct, that Fuller's are not enabled by AT, the subsidy, if you like, by AT, to unfairly compete in this market. The new ferries should be accessible to all ferry companies and not just Waiheke Direct. There needs to be a proper competitive price process, because people criticise AT, and I think quite rightly, for assisting monopolies in the transport market. If you could look at Sea-Link, what happened there, they moved from their old slot at Wynyard Wharf and were given, I understand, a significant new area, all paid for by the ratepayer, and that just reinforces monopoly. It's not necessarily helpful, especially for people who are competing in that market. No one's going to put price controls on PT fares. They always go up, or rather change, as AT prefers to call it. But we should not be reinforcing this monopoly. The only leverage that the public has over fares, especially ferry fares, is a certain degree of competition, especially for communities which are totally reliant on ferries like Waiheke. So I will be watching to ensure that this informal practice of reinforcing big monopolies, overseas monopolies, is stopped, and that there is a proper competitive price process for operating these new ferries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. The last speaker we have is Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just think this is disappointing. I would have liked to have been able to make the decision. It is funny around this table that we always want power over AT unless it's a decision you agree with, then you're happy that they made it. So, you know, it is a funny one. This didn't come from nowhere. We passed the climate plan together unanimously. Then we also went out to consult in 2022 on a budget that included a climate action targeted rate. And one of the big things in there was decarbonisation of the ferry fleet, which had good support from Auckland Transport and good support from the government at the time, so no, that's the change. But 68% of Aucklanders who submitted to that supported that targeted rate and supported the decarbonisation of the ferry fleet for very good reason. 20% of our carbon emissions are from our ferry fleet. People are very protective of the Hauraki Gulf and the Waitemata, and they know the smell and the pollution and the noise caused by our ferries is a big concern, especially up close in our basin there. I think it would have been nice if we figured out a transition way or a conversation together on what we could do, even to ensure we buy a couple more through this process, while maybe having these diesels for those granted for those longer routes, like up to Gulf Harbour, which potentially would be difficult with an electric. But I think what we've done is gone backwards. And with Sydney and New South Wales, other areas, Sydney's going to have a full electric fleet by 2035, and we'll be trying to sell them ours, I assume, our diesel ones. I think this is another backward step. I think this will lead to large costs, much higher costs for future Aucklanders, because we made a decision, well, we didn't make a decision, that actually got taken from us. So Auckland Transport made a decision to cost future Aucklanders a lot more on the environment, a lot more costs with the ETS and diesel, and I think it is a mistake, because once again, like the City Rail Link, people will see these electric ferries and low emission ferries out on the harbour over the next 2 years and expect and assume we're going to continue it. Because people did say with the electric buses in 2021, when we said we will not buy another, it couldn't be done. There's not enough companies to provide them. There's not enough of a runway of buses to be built. And now we've done phenomenal. We're going to have 450 electric buses next year, and our streets are quieter and less polluted because of it. And we're saving costs. So I'm disappointed with this direction. I think it's a backward step for our city, and I hope that next year we can work out a nuanced way forward that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put it now. I did signal, and we have to work through the program. I said that was the last speaker, so I'm going to put it now. All those in favour say aye. To the contrary say no. That is carried. The water care update.